The night Derek Ward stormed into St. Clair Hospital, soaking wet and furious, demanding access to his ex-wife's room. He was absolutely certain he was still in control. He had the lawyers. He had the forged documents. He had the court petition that would give him legal authority over her body, her babies, her entire future. He had spent 6 months building the perfect trap. What he did not know, what he could not have prepared for, was what was waiting for him on the other side of that door. Not a broken woman. Not the frightened, isolated person he had spent 3 years carefully constructing. What he found was a woman who had been quietly, methodically, and with the help of people he had completely underestimated, dismantling every single thing he had built against her. And the man standing beside her bed was not just anyone. He was the CEO whose company Derek had been trying to impress for 2 years. The father of the triplets Derek had been planning to use as leverage, and the last person on earth who was going to let Derek Ward walk through that door. Stay with me, because what happens next is not just a story about betrayal and revenge. It is a story about what happens when a woman who has been told she is nothing finally decides to believe otherwise. This story is for every person who has ever stayed quiet to keep the peace and wondered what would happen if they finally spoke. What you are about to hear is more than drama. It is a reminder that the people who work hardest to convince you that you are weak are usually the ones most afraid of your strength. If this story reaches something real in you today, if any part of it feels familiar, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like this video so it finds the people who are still looking for the exit. Leave a comment telling us what moment in this story hit you hardest. And subscribe, because every week we bring you stories exactly like this one. Stories about real human courage, told the way they deserve to be told. Now, let's begin.
The rain hit the glass doors of St. Clair Hospital like it had a personal grudge against them. Inside, the emergency maternity wing moved at the kind of speed that makes ordinary urgency look lazy. Nurses cut through corridors with purpose. Monitors beeped in overlapping rhythms. The air smelled of antiseptic and something harder to name, the particular tension of a building full of people fighting for outcomes that were not yet decided. On the 6th floor, in a private room with 3 fetal monitors glowing soft green against the dark, a woman named Ava Mitchell lay with both hands pressed flat against her stomach. Her face was pale. Her breathing was shallow. She had been awake for 31 hours, 3 heartbeats on the screen, one of them flickering. She watched the lines move and whispered something too quiet for the nurses to hear. Downstairs, the lobby doors burst open. A man in a soaked designer coat walked in like he owned the building and was deciding whether to sell it. He moved directly to the reception desk and placed both palms flat on the counter with the deliberate force of someone who had never once in his life been told to wait. "My wife," he said. "Ava Mitchell. She is upstairs. I need access to her room immediately." The receptionist, barely 20, working the overnight shift, completely unimpressed, looked up from her screen. "Sir," she said, "she's listed here as your ex-wife. There's a difference." The man's jaw tightened. Security began moving toward him, and somewhere on the 6th floor, a monitor flickered, and a woman who had spent 3 years learning to disappear pressed her hands harder against the 3 small lives inside her and said, very quietly, "Hold on." 6 months earlier, Ava Mitchell was the kind of person hospitals quietly depended on without fully noticing. An ICU nurse, West Village apartment barely wide enough for a couch, a bookshelf she'd never finished filling, and a collection of half-read novels stacked beside the radiator. She made decent money, tipped 20% at diners because she remembered being a waitress, and considered a full night's sleep one of life's genuine luxuries. She was not the kind of woman powerful men noticed, which was why, When Derek Ward laughed instead of scowling the night she accidentally poured sparkling water on his shoes at a charity fundraiser, she thought she'd misjudged him. She was working the event, not attending it. Name tag, black uniform, invisible in the way that service staff at wealthy gatherings are trained to be invisible. Derek was floating through the room in a suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, surrounded by the particular glow that money and confidence create when they exist in the same person. He looked down at his soaked shoe. He laughed. "You have kind eyes," he said. She should have said thank you and moved on. She almost did. He said she deserved better than name tags and night shifts. He said it gently, like he meant it, which was the most dangerous version of that sentence. Here is something nobody tells you about charming men. The ones who move fastest are usually running from something. When someone tries to become your whole world in 90 days, the right question is not, how did I get so lucky? The right question is, what are they replacing? But Ava was 31 and tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep, and Derek Ward was attentive and certain and there. Within a year, she left the NICU for his penthouse in Tribeca. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, walk-in closets she could have parked a car in. She told herself this was just life-changing shape. She told herself the feeling in her stomach, low, persistent, wrong, was just adjustment. Then the cracks appeared. He suggested she quit nursing. His money was enough. He didn't like her working late around so many men. He didn't care for her friend Caroline. Too loud, too opinionated, too much. He knew which of her friendships were worth keeping, and he was generous enough to help her identify the ones that weren't. She lost her friends one by one, not through arguments, but through drift. She stopped calling. She stopped being available. She forgot, gradually, that she had once been someone people called. And when she got pregnant, genuinely, joyfully, terrifyingly pregnant, Derek sat across from her at their kitchen table and explained with perfect calm why a child right now would derail everything he'd built. He had already researched the clinic. He had already scheduled the appointment. She went. She has never fully forgiven herself for going. When she finally left, she did it at 6 in the morning on a Tuesday, wearing one shoe because she grabbed whatever was closest to the door. She had $40 in her wallet and a phone with a cracked screen and the specific, shaking relief of someone who has just realized they are not too late. She was wrong about the relief. Derek didn't need fists. He never had. He had a phone and a contact list and a voice that sounded reasonable to anyone who didn't know what lived underneath it. Within 6 weeks, her nursing license was under unexplained review. Job offers evaporated before interviews. Her apartment applications were mysteriously denied by buildings that had openings. She moved into a sublet in Washington Heights where the radiator hissed and the window overlooked a fire escape, and she told herself, some nights, that freedom has noise, control has silence. She said it like a prayer. Her friend, Caroline Simmons, who lived in Brooklyn, worked in hospital administration, and had an opinion on absolutely everything, drove 40 minutes to pick Ava up from a bus stop in the Bronx with a fast food bag and 0 questions. "You look terrible," Caro said. "Thank you," Ava said. "That's the most honest thing anyone said to me in 2 years." Caro drove in silence for a block and a half. Then, I looked him up. His LinkedIn photo has soft lighting. That's not a crime. Men with soft lighting LinkedIn photos are always dangerous, Ava. Always. I have a theory. She merged onto the bridge. Twice divorced, apparently. You researched him. I was concerned, also bored, mostly concerned. She handed Ava a sandwich without looking away from the road. Eat something. We'll figure out the rest later. The rest was harder than either of them said out loud. Ava worked event catering, convention staffing, anything that paid and didn't require references she no longer had. She walked with her hood up. She sat with her back to restaurant walls. She jumped at phones ringing in other people's pockets. She was fine. She told everyone she was fine. She told herself most often. It was at a corporate technology conference, where she was setting up catering on the 14th floor of a glass building on Park Avenue, that her body finally gave her honest feedback. One moment she was carrying a tray of champagne flutes. The next, she was on the floor, looking up at a ceiling tile, with no memory of sitting down. When she woke, there was a man in the chair beside her hospital bed. He looked like he hadn't slept. He had the kind of face that appeared on business magazine covers, sharp-boned, serious, the sort of handsome that comes from good structure rather than effort. But he was sitting in a plastic hospital chair with his elbows on his knees, and he looked less like a billionaire and more like a man at the end of a long argument with himself. "I'm Ethan Calloway," he said. She recognized the name. "You don't have to stay," she said. "I know," he said. He didn't move. Ethan Calloway had built his company from a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens using a laptop, a folding table, and approximately 4 hours of sleep per night for 3 consecutive years. By 35, he was worth $2 billion. By 38, when his wife Claire was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer, he was worth $6 billion and had recently learned that there existed a category of problem that money could not solve. Claire died on a Tuesday in March. She was 36 years old. She liked early morning walks, terrible reality television, and the particular kind of laugh that starts before the funny part is finished. She died in a hospital bed with Ethan's hand in hers and a nurse on the other side of her who read quietly to her during the nights when pain made sleep impossible. Ethan had not learned that nurse's name. He had been barely functional for months after the diagnosis. He sat beside Claire every hour. He wasn't contractually obligated to be elsewhere, and the hours he was obligated to be elsewhere, he spent looking at his phone, waiting for news that never came at a good time. He remembered the nurse with the steady hands, the quiet one, the one who stayed past her shift and never once made Claire feel like a burden. He had never thought to ask her name. His assistant Oliver Reed, 28, unfailingly organized, and possessed of the specific loyalty that comes from 3 years of watching a man grieve quietly without complaint, managed the period after Claire's death the way a very good assistant manages every impossible situation, by handling the things that could be handled and pretending not to notice the things that couldn't. On day 11 after the funeral, Oliver quietly replaced Ethan's gray sweater, the one he had worn without changing since the service, with an identical one while Ethan was in the shower. Ethan never noticed. Oliver has never mentioned it. Some kindnesses work precisely because they are invisible. When Ethan recognized Ava in the hospital bed, when he placed her face against the memory of a NICU corridor, and a woman reading softly to his dying wife at 2 a.m, he did not immediately say so. He sat beside her and said his name and waited. He offered her a position at the Calloway Foundation 3 days later. Project Coordinator for Neonatal Research Initiatives. Not pity, he was specific about that, in his particular way of being specific, which was to say it once, directly, and then not repeat it. "Your background is directly relevant," he said. They were sitting across from each other in his office, which had the floor-to-ceiling windows and the kind of furniture that signals money without shouting about it. The foundation works on neonatal care access nationally. You understand the clinical reality better than anyone currently on the team. You don't know me, Ava said. I know you read to dying women at 2 in the morning when it wasn't your shift. That tells me most of what I need. She didn't answer immediately. She looked at her hands, then she looked up. I'll think about it, she said. She thought about it for 4 days. She said yes on the 5th. Rebuilding trust after betrayal is not about lowering your standards. It is about watching for consistency over time. Not grand gestures, but small, repeated actions. Anyone can show up once. The question is, who shows up on an ordinary Tuesday with nothing particular to gain? Ethan showed up on ordinary Tuesdays. He was not dramatic about it. He left tea on her desk when she looked tired. He introduced her to donors as an essential part of the team without performance. He asked how she was settling in on her 3rd day, and then stood in silence for 7 full seconds when she said fine, because he had already used up his small talk and didn't know what came next. Oliver appeared at Ava's elbow approximately 45 seconds after Ethan retreated to his office. That was basically a sonnet from him, Oliver said quietly. He once went 11 days without speaking to anyone in this office who wasn't contractually required to be here. You should be genuinely flattered. He stood there in silence. Warmly, Oliver said. There's a difference. Ava laughed despite herself. It was the first time in months that laughter arrived without effort. She settled into the rhythm of the foundation the way water finds its level. Slowly, then completely. The work spoke her language. Compassion, precision, the particular urgency of people who understood that the smallest patients required the most careful attention. She breathed easier around these people. She laughed at lunch sometimes. She arrived early some mornings just to watch the sun come up over Central Park through the corner windows. She was not fully healed. She knew that. But she was moving forward instead of sideways, which was something she had not been able to say in a long time. What she did not know was that across the city, in a penthouse where the furniture was expensive and the air felt thinner somehow, a man was opening a manila envelope. Derek Ward spread the photographs across his kitchen island. 8 photos, different days. Ava entering the Callaway building on Park Avenue. Ava in conversation with a man whose face was partially turned away. Ava standing at a window on an upper floor, not hiding, not hunched, not small. He looked at the photographs for a long time. Then he looked at the man in the turned away photograph. He had seen that face on magazine covers. He picked up his phone. Get me everything on Ethan Callaway, he said. Everything. He set the photos down carefully. He poured himself a drink. He looked at the photograph of Ava standing in a window. Her face turned toward light, and his expression was not grief, and it was not love. It was the specific, dangerous expression of a man who has just decided that something that belongs to him has forgotten its place. The Plaza Hotel ballroom, in December, looked the way wealth looks when it is not trying, which is to say, effortlessly overwhelming. Crystal chandeliers sent fractured light across marble floors. Women in evening gowns drifted between tables. Men in tuxedos conducted business disguised as socializing. The string quartet in the corner played Vivaldi, and nobody listened, but everyone was glad it was there. Ava had spent 6 weeks building this event from the logistics up. Donor seating, floral arrangements, the lighting calculations that made the difference between a room that felt warm and a room that just looked expensive. She knew every vendor, every timeline, every contingency. She was wearing navy blue, borrowed from Caro, who had spent 45 minutes before the car arrived explaining that Ava looked, and she was quoting directly, objectively stunning. And she was saying that as someone who had personally witnessed Ava eat cereal out of a measuring cup at 2 in the morning, so the bar for this assessment was very calibrated. For the first hour, the event was everything Ava had worked for. Donors engaged. The neonatal program presentation received applause that sounded genuine rather than polite. She moved between tables, checking details, and twice she caught Ethan watching her from across the room with an expression she couldn't quite name. Steady, attentive, something quieter than admiration, but in the same neighborhood. She was adjusting a centerpiece near the east wall when the main doors opened. The particular way a room changes when a certain kind of person enters is difficult to describe to someone who has not experienced it. The air doesn't move differently, the sound doesn't change exactly, but something shifts. A collective tightening, a subtle reorientation of attention, like a room of animals that have collectively registered something that might be a threat. Derek Ward walked in wearing a tuxedo he'd clearly had pressed that afternoon, shoulders rigid, jaw set, eyes moving across the room with the focused efficiency of a man who has already located his target and is deciding on approach. He found Ava in 4 seconds. She saw him in 5. The tray she was holding didn't fall. She put it down deliberately, carefully, the way you handle things when your hands are shaking and you need to pretend they aren't. He crossed the room at exactly the pace of someone who is not rushing because they don't need to. "You look well," he said when he reached her. Soft voice, the smile she remembered from the beginning, pleasant on the surface, calibrated underneath. "I've been worried about you. Derek, you need to leave. I just came to talk. You've been avoiding my calls. I'm concerned. You're performing." He stepped closer, not aggressively, just enough to rearrange the space between them. She felt it, the way you feel a door closing in a room with no windows. "Relax," he murmured. "People are watching." "Then leave, now." He reached out and wrapped his hand around her wrist. Not tight, precise. The specific grip of someone who knows exactly how much pressure communicates authority without crossing a line that could be photographed. Ethan was across the room before she processed that he'd moved. He positioned himself beside Ava, not in front of her, beside her, and when he spoke, his voice was so quiet it almost didn't carry. "Let go of her arm." Derek released, smiled, turned slightly toward the nearest journalist. There were several. This was a photographed event, and raised his voice just enough. "I'm here because I'm genuinely worried about my ex-wife. She hasn't been herself. Working in this environment, around this level of stress, I don't think it's healthy for her." The ripple moved through the nearby guests instantly. Ava watched it happen in real time. The tilted heads, the exchanged glances, the mechanism she recognized from 3 years ago engaging with terrible efficiency. One sentence. Planted in the right room. Watered by the right audience. It would grow in the dark for days. She could not fight it publicly. Fighting it publicly was exactly what he wanted. Visible distress, photographed reaction, evidence of instability he could point to later. That was the trap. It had always been the trap. Ethan stepped fully in front of Derek. "You have 30 seconds to leave," he said, "before I have security remove you and make certain every journalist in this room understands exactly why." Derek stepped back. Slowly, smile still in place. "We'll see," he said. As he passed Ava, he leaned slightly towards Stush here. "You thought you could hide from me." His voice was barely above a whisper. His eyes dropped, just briefly, to her stomach. "You're carrying secrets, Ava. I know what they are." He walked toward the exit. Security moved to escort him out. Ava stood very still. He knew. She hadn't told anyone. She was 11 weeks along, and she had been telling herself she would figure out what came next before she said anything out loud. She had been carrying it alone in the specific silence of someone managing one crisis at a time. Derek knew. The bathroom tile was cold. She didn't remember getting there. She was sitting on the floor with her back against the wall and both hands pressed over her face when she heard the door open. Ethan sat on the floor beside her, not close enough to crowd, present enough to matter. Several seconds of silence. "I hate this tile," he said finally. "We spent $40,000 on this event, and the bathroom tile is genuinely offensive." The laugh came out of her before she could stop it. The kind of laugh that cracks something open that has been sealed too long. Then she said the word she had been carrying alone for 11 weeks. "Ethan?" Her voice was unsteady. "I'm pregnant." The silence became a different shape. "Triplets." He looked at her for a long moment. Something moved across his face that she couldn't quite read. Not alarm, not withdrawal, but a kind of reckoning. "And you've been carrying this alone," he said. "I didn't want to make it your problem. Ava, you have a company, an IPO, a life that functions. You don't need... I need you alive and not fighting this alone." The words came out with more urgency than he'd clearly planned. He stopped, steadied. "That's what I need." She looked at him on the bathroom floor of the Plaza Hotel, in a rented tuxedo, completely undignified, absolutely serious, and felt something she had not felt in a very long time, like someone was standing between her and the storm without keeping round to running tally of what it cost them. She didn't say anything, but she stopped trying to stand up alone. Ethan arrived at her apartment at 7 the next morning with a paper bag from the bakery 2 blocks down and an expression that confirmed he had not slept. He sat across from her at her small kitchen table, his knees noticeably too high for the chair, deeply uncomfortable, refusing to acknowledge it, and placed an envelope between them. Her name was on the front. The handwriting was precise, slightly slanted. She did not recognize it, and somehow that made it more frightening than if she had. "Claire left this for you?" Ethan said. "I found it with her lawyer after the estate settled. She didn't know your name. She told the firm to find the nurse with the steady hands and the gentle soul." He paused. "It took me a while to figure out that was you." Ava stared at the envelope, like it might move. "Why are you giving it to me now?" He looked at the table, then at her. "Because last night, when you told me about the pregnancy, the thing I saw in your face wasn't joy. It was exhaustion and terror and the specific expression of someone who has decided they don't deserve to be helped." His voice was even. "Claire wrote that letter for a reason. I thought it was time you read it." She opened it slowly. The paper inside was thin, the ink slightly faded. Claire Calloway's handwriting was neat and direct, and occasionally underlined for emphasis, which somehow made it feel more alive than any voice recording could have. "Dear nurse," it began, "if you are reading this, I am already gone, so let's skip the sad part and get to the useful part." Ava's throat closed. "My husband is a good man who has terrible instincts about his own feelings. He will not tell you that he is lonely. He will not admit that grief has made him smaller than he actually is. He will sit in rooms full of people and look fine and be lying. You, I suspect, will recognize this immediately because you are a nurse and nurses see through performance the way the rest of us see through glass. If he finds you, and I believe he will, because people who matter to each other tend to keep finding each other, please don't be afraid of him. He is better than he appears, which is saying something because he appears quite decent. Ethan's jaw was working. He was looking at the window. She was funnier than me, he said finally. I noticed, Ava said. You have a steadiness he needs, Claire's letter continued. And I think, though I've only known you in the specific intimacy of very bad nights, that you need someone who shows up. He shows up. It is almost the only thing he does reliably, but he does it every single time. I am not asking you to love him. I'm asking you not to run from the possibility. You deserve a life that isn't about surviving. Ava set the letter down and pressed both hands over her face, not to hide, just to hold herself together while the thing that had been slowly building in her chest for months finally broke the surface. Ethan waited. He was very good at waiting. Ethan, she said finally, I can't let him do this again. Derek. He'll use the pregnancy. He'll use the babies. He'll use any lawyer he can find and any story he can construct. And I know. You don't know what he's capable of. Then tell me. She told him. All of it. The nursing license, the apartment applications, the network of quiet professional assassinations that had followed her out of his penthouse like a shadow she couldn't outpace. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and placed a small stack of documents on the table beside Claire's letter. Restraining order filings, a security detail roster, a legal declaration of paternity bearing his signature. Ava stared at it. You already filed? Last night, after the gala. He was matter-of-fact about it. Margaret, my attorney, worked through the night. The declaration of paternity establishes my legal standing immediately. The restraining order creates documented grounds for escalation if he violates. Ethan, these are my children. You don't have to. I'm protecting the mother of my children, he said, simply, like it was a sentence that needed no elaboration. No one had ever said that to her. Not like that, not with that particular quality of certainty that doesn't ask for anything in return. She didn't answer for a long moment. He reached into his jacket pocket again and produced a small velvet box, not a ring. She registered that instantly, and the register of her own relief was information she filed away for later. Inside was a delicate necklace, a thin chain with a simple pendant that caught the morning light. Claire asked that you have this, he said. She described it as armor for someone who didn't know yet that she needed it. He clasped it around her neck. The metal was cool. She looked at her reflection in the dark window of the microwave. Messy hair, tired eyes. A necklace that belonged to a woman who had thought about her kindness enough to leave her something. For the first time in a long time, what she saw, looking back at her, was not someone hiding. Then her phone buzzed. Unknown number, one photograph. Derek Ward standing on the sidewalk directly below her building. Face tilted upward, staring at her window. Below it, one line of text. Did you really think a restraining order stops me? Margaret Holloway arrived at Ethan's penthouse at 9 the following morning, carrying a briefcase and the expression of a surgeon who has found something in the imaging she did not expect. She set her tablet on the kitchen island and turned it to face them both. There is a leak inside the Calloway organization, she said. Ethan went completely still. The quality of his stillness was different from ordinary quiet. It had weight to it. Who? He said. Margaret tapped the screen once. The name that appeared made the room very quiet for several seconds. Oliver Reed. Oliver, Ethan said flatly. Oliver who sends Ava Calendar reminders for prenatal appointments. Oliver who drove to 3 separate pharmacies last week to find the specific prenatal vitamin brand that doesn't cause nausea. That Oliver. Yes, Margaret said, with the carefully maintained neutrality of someone paid to deliver impossible information without editorializing. Oliver arrived 20 minutes later. He came voluntarily, which said something. He stood in the entrance of the penthouse with his hands visible and his face doing the particular work of a person who has spent several days preparing to confess to something and has not found a version of the confession that makes it sound less bad. He had not been bought. He had been threatened. Derek had assembled a file on Oliver's younger sister, a nurse at a hospital in Connecticut, who had made a minor administrative documentation error 2 years earlier, the kind that could be catastrophic with the right people paying attention to it. Derek had made clear he had the right people's attention ready. Oliver chose his sister. He understood that did not make it right. He said so several times in slightly different words while staring at a point approximately 6 inches above the kitchen floor. He told me Ava was unstable, Oliver said. He showed me documents. He said she was a risk to herself and to the pregnancy and that he was trying to help her. He said he just needed to know her schedule so he could make sure she was safe. He stopped. I told myself I believed him because believing him made me the person helping rather than the person betraying. Ethan was quiet for a moment. What did you give him? Your schedule, her medical appointment times, building access logs. The silence stretched. He knew when she'd be alone, Ethan said. Oliver nodded. His face had collapsed into something that was past guilt and working its way toward genuine devastation. Get out of this building, Ethan said, and call my office on Monday because you are not fired. You are being transferred to the Foundation's Seattle branch until I determine what comes next. Oliver blinked. You're not... I am furious with you, Ethan said. That is a separate category from fired. He turned back to the window. Also, contact your sister today. Have her retain an attorney. I will cover the retainer. Caro, informed of events by phone approximately 40 minutes later, was briefly speechless. He's terrifying and decent, she said finally. That is genuinely unfair to every other man currently alive. Oliver's final piece of information was the one that reached into the room and rearranged everything. Derek had accessed Ava's most recent ultrasound report before she did. The report had flagged an irregular heartbeat in baby B, a finding Dr. Bowman had intended to discuss with Ava directly at a follow-up appointment scheduled for the following week. The irregularity was noted, not alarming, a standard monitoring flag. Derek had seen it first. He had also, according to forensic review of the hospital's digital records, attempted to log into the system a second time, not to read, to edit. He had tried to alter the record to indicate that Ava had refused recommended monitoring treatment. Ava absorbed this, sitting on the edge of the couch with both hands in her lap. He hadn't just been following her. He had been trying to construct a version of her on paper, in systems, in official records that was dangerous, negligent, unfit. A woman who couldn't be trusted with her own body. A woman who needed someone else to make decisions for her, the same cage, different documents. I can't keep doing this. But this Tom, she said. Her voice was very quiet. I cannot fight him and grow 3 human beings at the same time. I am one person. One of the most dangerous things survivors of controlling relationships carry forward is the belief that asking for help is weakness. It is not. It is strategy. You cannot win a war on 2 fronts by yourself. The people who love you are not a burden. They are your reserves. Ethan sat beside her. Then stop fighting him alone, he said. She looked at him. Let me fight the legal war, he said. You fight the biological one. Those are both full-time positions. She breathed in slowly, out slowly. Okay, she said. It was the hardest word she had said in months. It was also the most important. The venue was a waterfront event space in Lower Manhattan, with views of the harbor and the particular kind of natural light that makes everything feel more honest than it is. Margaret had recommended it. The framing was a Callaway Foundation announcement about expanded neonatal research funding. The actual purpose was simpler. Give Ava a microphone before Derek could take the room away from her again. Caro spent the morning saying the phrase, objectively speaking, "This is the most unhinged power move I have ever personally witnessed, and I mean that as the highest possible compliment at intervals of approximately 7 minutes. Ava did not use notes. She stood at the podium with 60 journalists in front of her and Ethan slightly to her right. Close enough that she could feel him there, far enough that the words would be hers. And she began with the only true thing she knew how to start with. My name is Ava Mitchell, and I'm here today because someone has spent 3 years deciding my story for me. I'd like to take it back. The room found its silence quickly. She named the pattern. Not just Derek by name. The pattern. The isolation disguised as protection. The financial dependency constructed as love. The medical coercion she had never spoken about publicly, that she named now in plain language, because plain language was the only kind that survived being weaponized. She named what happened after she left. The career destruction, systematic and quiet, the nursing license, the job offers that vanished, the way a woman leaving an abusive situation is punished, not by the law, but by the infrastructure of influence that powerful men maintain specifically for this purpose. I was quiet for 3 years because I believed the story he told about me. I was unreliable, unstable, difficult. I believed it long enough that I almost forgot I had built a career on being someone families trusted with their most fragile children. She paused. I am not unstable. I am a woman who survived something, and I am standing here, and I am choosing to say his name, not because he deserves the attention, because I deserve the freedom. The response was immediate. Microphones, recorders, the contained electricity of a room that has just received something it can use. For 48 hours, it worked. The story ran across every major outlet by evening. 3 separate journalists contacted Derek's publicist for comment and received non-responses that read like exactly what they were. Margaret filed a formal police report, compiling 2 years of documented incidents into a single coherent timeline. The district attorney's office made preliminary contact. Caro came to the penthouse with sparkling grape juice for Ava and actual champagne for everyone else, and declared that victory should always be celebrated on the floor because it keeps you humble. She was sitting cross-legged on the kitchen floor of a $12 million penthouse explaining this philosophy when Ethan appeared in the doorway holding a glass of champagne with the expression of a man who has genuinely never considered sitting on a floor voluntarily. You could join us, Ava said. I'm comfortable here. Ethan. I don't sit on floors. Ethan. He sat on the floor. His face for the duration suggested this was a significant, personal sacrifice that he expected to be remembered. Dr. Bowman called the next morning with the scan results. All 3 heartbeats were steady. Baby B had strengthened measurably. The irregular pattern from the previous report had resolved. Ava stood at the penthouse window, looking out at the city, and let herself feel, for 48 hours, like something was over. Then Margaret's phone rang at 11:30 at night. She came into the living room where Ava was reading, and her expression was the expression Ava had learned to read on her face. The carefully controlled delivery of bad news by someone who has practiced not letting bad news show. Derek filed an emergency court petition tonight, Margaret said. Psychological unfitness, temporary medical conservatorship, Ava set her book down. The petition claims you are a risk to the pregnancy. It includes a psychological evaluation from a licensed clinician. Margaret paused. The evaluation was conducted by a Dr. Frank Rourke. I've never been evaluated by anyone named Frank Rourke. No, Margaret said. You haven't, because the document is forged. The word landed in the room with physical weight. He also bribed a court clerk to fast-track the hearing. We have 48 hours before a judge sees this. Conservatorship. The word moved through Ava slowly, finding every place she was vulnerable and pressing there. Not just Derek watching her, Derek with legal authority. The ability to walk into her hospital room. The right to override her medical decisions. The exact mechanism of control he had always used, now laminated and court-stamped. He's doing it again, she said. Her voice was very quiet. Different paperwork, same cage. She looked at her hands, the hands that had steadied 100 fragile newborns, the hands that had signed the divorce papers she had believed would free her. I am so tired, she said. Not broken, tired. There was a difference, and in that moment, the difference was everything. The emergency hearing happened in a judge's chambers rather than a courtroom. Smaller, faster, the legal equivalent of triage. Derek's attorney, James Pruitt, presented the forged psychological evaluation with the polished confidence of someone who had rehearsed the presentation 3 times. The judge was skeptical. The paperwork was technically in order. He ordered an independent court-appointed evaluation within 24 hours before any ruling would be made. This sounded like a partial victory. It lasted approximately 40 minutes. Margaret's investigator identified the evaluator Derek had requested, and the professional relationship between that evaluator and Pruitt's firm, a relationship that had produced favorable assessments in 2 previous cases where the outcomes had subsequently been reviewed. He didn't just file the petition, Margaret said. She was standing in the hospital hallway, phone in one hand, 3 different documents in the other, looking like someone running 3 parallel calculations simultaneously. He pre-selected the evaluator. He is trying to control the outcome of his own investigation. Document everything, continuously and immediately. Dates, times, witnesses, messages. Courts respond to patterns, not individual incidents. A single event is deniable. A documented timeline tells the story that any single moment cannot tell by itself. Ava had been documenting. Margaret had been filing. The paper trail existed, but Derek had been building his own, and his had a head start. Document your abuser's pattern. Not just their actions, the pattern. Ava was at St. Clair for an urgent monitoring appointment when Dr. Bowman asked her to sit down. A physician asking you to sit down before delivering information is its own category of sentence. Baby B's heartbeat is irregular again, Dr. Bowman said. More significantly than before. Your cortisol levels have been elevated for an extended period, and your body is not distinguishing between a legal threat and a physical one. To your nervous system, Derek in a courtroom is Derek at the door. She was direct, but not unkind. Baby B is responding to both, so I stop fighting. I'm saying that your nervous system needs something to tell it. The fight is not happening inside your body. The stress response that is keeping you sharp in a crisis is the same response that is affecting Baby B's cardiovascular function. She paused. The 2 things are not separable right now. Ethan was in the hallway when Ava came out. He read her face. He took her hand. No speech, no plan offered. Just took her hand and held it. It was the most useful thing that had happened all week. The call about the apartment came from Caro at 9:15 that evening. Her voice on the phone was completely flat. Caro went flat when she was past anger and working towards something colder. Someone was in Ava's apartment, Caro said. I stopped by to get the rest of her things. A pause. He didn't take anything. He didn't break anything. Then what did he do? Ethan said. He turned every photograph face down, opened every drawer, left the bedroom window unlocked. Another pause. And he wrote on the bathroom mirror in her lipstick, "I was here." The silence on the line lasted several seconds. He wanted her to know, Caro said. Her voice had dropped to something very controlled. He went into her home while she was at the hospital worrying about her babies, and he wanted her to know he could get there anytime he wanted. When Ava heard, she didn't cry. She went quiet in the specific way she went quiet when she was making a decision rather than processing an emotion. "He wanted me to know he could reach me anywhere," she said, a pause. "So I need to go somewhere he can't follow." She looked at Ethan. "Is your offer still open?" "It was never an offer," he said. "It's your home for as long as you need it." The court overrode Derek's requested evaluator after Margaret presented a 6-page document detailing the professional connection to Pruitt's firm. The replacement was a woman named Dr. Sarah Wentworth, court-appointed, independently contracted, known in New York legal circles for the specific quality of being entirely unbribable, which in certain circles was considered an almost eccentric character trait. She arrived at St. Clair Hospital with reading glasses and a clipboard and the demeanor of someone who had seen every manipulation tactic currently in existence and found all of them tedious. She asked Ava standard questions for 12 minutes. Then she put down her clipboard. "I'm going to tell you something outside my formal evaluation," Dr. Wentworth said. "I've been conducting court-ordered mental health assessments for 19 years. The petition filed against you has the characteristic architecture of a harassment campaign dressed in clinical language. I will conduct the formal evaluation with full professional rigor and document exactly what I find." "Which is," Ava said, "a woman under extraordinary sustained stress who is functioning at a level most people without her history couldn't sustain." She looked at Ava directly. "The clinical term for what you're doing, Ms. Mitchell, is remarkable." Margaret's forensic technology team surfaced the first major reveal at 2 in the afternoon. The forged psychological evaluation, the centerpiece of Derek's entire petition, contained metadata. The document had been created on a specific device at a specific IP address, and the creation date was stamped in the file's hidden information. The document had been created 11 days before the Foundation Gala, 11 days before the event Derek had supposedly filed the petition in response to. "He planned this before the gala," Margaret said. Her voice had a particular quality, the controlled tone of someone who has found something that changes the shape of everything that came before it. The forged documents, the petition, the conservatorship bid, none of it was reactive. He built the entire legal framework before Ava ever spoke publicly. "He wanted her to go to the gala," Ethan said slowly. "He wanted her to speak. He needed her visibly distressed at a public event so he could point to it later as evidence of instability." Margaret set the document down. The press conference wasn't an ambush. "It was a trap he set 3 weeks before she walked into it," Ava said. The room was very quiet. Caro, sitting in the corner with a cup of coffee, said, "He used her courage against her. He waited for her to be brave and then built a cage around the bravery." Nobody said anything for a moment. "Okay," Caro said quietly. "I am now genuinely frightened of him." The second reveal arrived via Margaret's investigator 40 minutes later. Derek's attorney Pruitt had been constructing a parallel legal instrument alongside the conservatorship petition, emergency guardianship of unborn children. A legal mechanism so rarely invoked that its case law barely existed, but technically operable in extreme circumstances. If granted, it would give Derek standing as a concerned party in the welfare of Ava's children. No biological relationship required. No legal connection to Ava or Ethan required. He was trying to attach himself to the children permanently, not through Ava, through them. He was never trying to get her back, Ethan said. No, Margaret said. He was trying to make sure she could never fully leave. The recording arrived via Oliver from Seattle, sent with a message that said only, "I found this on my phone. I am so sorry. I did not know he was being recorded. Use it however you need to." The voice memo had been accidentally captured during a call Oliver had received. Derek, calling to give him instructions, Oliver's pocket recording the entire conversation without Oliver's awareness. Margaret played it once. Derek's voice was clear and unhurried, the voice of a man speaking to someone he owned. "You find me someone who will sign the evaluation, or I make your professional history my personal project. And that nurse, that pathetic woman, I will have her declared unfit before the week is over. She thinks speaking at a press conference makes her untouchable. She has no idea what untouchable actually looks like." The recording ended. Margaret placed her phone on the table. "Extortion of a witness," she said. "Conspiracy to commit fraud. This recording goes to the district attorney tonight." She paused. "There will not be a courtroom. There will be an arrest." Derek arrived at St. Clair Hospital at 8:47 in the evening. The rain that had been threatening since noon arrived with him, which in retrospect felt appropriate. He came through the main entrance in a soaked designer coat, moving with the certainty of a man who has not yet understood that the walls have already closed. He reached the reception desk and placed both palms flat on the counter. "My wife is upstairs. I want access to her room immediately." "Sir," said the receptionist, the same young woman from 6 months earlier, working the same overnight shift, possessed of the same magnificent patience. "She is listed as your ex-wife. There is a difference." He shoved past the first security guard before the second one reached him. He was moving toward the elevator when 3 members of hospital security tackled him in the lobby. He went down shouting, "She is mine. She has always been mine. You cannot take what is mine." There were 4 journalists in the lobby who had been staking out the hospital for 3 days waiting for developments. All 4 of them recorded the entire thing. The word "mine," spoken 3 times, each time louder. Margaret, watching the footage on a tablet in Ava's room, set it down with the expression of someone who has just received an unexpected gift. "He just made our case for us," she said. Upstairs, Ava heard the distant commotion, the particular muffled energy of something happening in a building. Without hearing words, she knew what it was. Baby B's monitor flickered. Ethan moved before she could speak. He stepped in front of the monitor and placed his hand against her face, turning her attention toward him deliberately. "Right here," he said. "Look at me. Is it over? Almost. Almost is not. Almost means this part is." He kept his eyes on hers, even and present and entirely steady. "The next part is better." Dr. Bowman entered 30 seconds later. She looked at the monitor, adjusted the drip, watched Baby B's line for a long moment. The irregular pattern steadied. Not resolved, but present. Holding. "She's stubborn," Dr. Bowman said. "She gets it honestly," Ethan said quietly. Ava looked at him. "You said she." "Reasonable guess." "You don't know that." "No," he agreed, "but I'm fairly confident." The arrest happened at 9:12. Security escorted Derek through the lobby in handcuffs as every camera in the building's vicinity recorded. His face in those moments was not the face she had known. Not controlled, not calculating, not the practiced expression of someone who had spent years managing how he appeared. It was the face of a man who had genuinely not believed in consequences until they were locked around his wrists. A reporter called out a question. Derek said something about Ava, about her ruining him, about her belonging to him. The sound clip played on 3 news networks before midnight. Margaret came upstairs with the arrest details delivered in the tone of a woman reading a shopping list. Stalking, criminal harassment, forgery, tampering with medical records, extortion of a witness, bribery of a court official, conspiracy to commit fraud. James Pruitt resigned the case by email at 11:15. Caro's response to this information was immediate. His own lawyer quit by email, not a phone call, not a letter, an email. That is the legal equivalent of breaking up by text, and I am choosing to find it deeply satisfying. At 2 in the morning, the hospital wing was quiet. The monitors hummed their soft rhythms. 3 heartbeats on 3 screens, all of them present. Ethan was asleep in the chair beside Ava's bed, head tilted at an angle that would clearly result in a complaint about his neck by morning, entirely undignified, not going anywhere. She watched him for a while. "I know you're awake," he said, without opening his eyes. "How do you—" "Your breathing changes when you're thinking." She was quiet for a moment. "You learned my breathing pattern. It was not intentional. You were nearby for an extended period. Patterns become apparent." "Ethan." "Yes, I understand what that sounds like." "Then say what it means." He opened his eyes. In the low light of the hospital room, he looked like himself. No performance, no presentation, just the version of him that existed when there was no one to be convincing for. "I'm aware of what's been happening to me," he said. "I have been aware for some time. I didn't want to say it in a hospital room during the worst months of your life, because I didn't want it to be about the situation. I wanted it to be about you choosing it, not you being in a position where it was the available option." "What if it isn't just the situation?" Ava said quietly. He looked at her for a long moment. "Then I will still say it properly," he said. "When you're ready, when everything isn't on fire, when you have actual options in front of you, and you choose this one." "And if I tell you I already know what I'd choose?" "Then I'll say," he said, "that I have loved you since the night I sat beside your hospital bed and watched you apologize for taking up space, and that I intend to spend a very long time making sure you never feel the need to do that again." Ava was quiet. "The cereal from a measuring cup thing is not negotiable," she said, finally. "I'm not giving that up." "I know, and I don't trust quickly or easily." "I highlighted a prenatal nutrition guide," he said, "in 3 colors. I am clearly not looking for easy." She reached across and took his hand. He held it without saying anything else, because some things do not need additional words, and Ethan Calloway had finally, after a considerable amount of time, learned which category this fell into. 6 weeks later, St. Clair Hospital, private delivery suite, 3 monitors, 3 heartbeats, all of them steady, including baby B, who had spent the preceding month demonstrating the kind of cardiovascular improvement Dr. Bowman described as overcorrecting with enthusiasm. Baby B had apparently decided that the irregular pattern was behind her and she had opinions about it. Caro was in the waiting room. She had been there for 4 hours and 40 minutes. She had reorganized the magazine rack, learned the names of both nurses on the floor, and was currently teaching a hospital volunteer a card game she claimed to have invented, but had almost certainly not invented. Oliver was in Seattle. He had sent flowers, significantly too many flowers, which arrived in 3 separate deliveries and filled the hallway outside the suite with a volume of floral arrangement that required negotiation with nursing staff. His note said, I know flowers don't fix it, but congratulations. I mean that completely. From the Seattle branch, apparently. Margaret Holloway had sent a brief text at 6 in the morning that read, "Preliminary charges confirmed on all 6 counts. Minimum 18 months on the forgery alone. He will not be anywhere near you or the children." Then a second text, 30 seconds later, "Congratulations." That was the entirety of Margaret's sentimentality. Ava found it exactly right. Derek did not appear in this chapter. He was handled. He existed in courtrooms and legal filings, and the careful documentation Margaret's office had assembled with the precision of people who understood that thoroughness is its own form of protection. He would face consequences that were appropriate and documented and entirely separate from Ava's life going forward. Some victories are not dramatic. Some victories are just the absence of a weight you'd been carrying so long you forgot what it felt like to stand straight. The delivery itself, Ava would describe it later to Caro as approximately as reasonable as delivering 3 humans simultaneously can be, which is not very reasonable, but is survivable. Dr. Bowman, who had been Ava's physician for 8 months and had seen her at her most frightened and her most determined and everything between, announced the arrival of each baby with the particular combination of professional calm and genuine joy that makes a great doctor irreplaceable. Baby A, a boy, clear-voiced and opinionated from the first breath, which Ethan noted was familiar. Baby C, a girl, smaller than expected and immediately visibly fine. Baby B, the last, the one who had flickered and held and strengthened and fought for 6 weeks from inside the impossible smallness of where she was. She came into the world furious and vocal and absolutely present. "On brand," Dr. Bowman said. Ethan laughed. "The real kind, unguarded, the kind that comes from a place below planning." And it was the best sound Ava had heard in longer than she could remember. On the 3rd morning, winter sunlight came through the hospital windows at the particular angle that makes Manhattan look like it was designed rather than accumulated. Ava was standing at the window holding baby B, who was asleep in the specific absolute way that newborns sleep, as though unconsciousness is a competition, when Ethan came to stand beside her. They looked out at the city together for a while without speaking. "The offer stands," Ethan said finally. "Which offer?" "All of them." She turned to look at him. He was watching her with the expression she had come to recognize as his serious face, which was indistinguishable from his ordinary face to most people, but she had learned the difference, the slight shift in the set of his jaw, the way his eyes didn't move. "I'm not easy," she said. "I've said this." "You have. I remember." 3 children. Trust issues that will require ongoing patience. The serial. "I've integrated the serial into my worldview," he said. "I've made peace with it." Ethan. Ava. She shifted baby B slightly. The baby remained entirely uninterested in the adult proceedings. "Then ask me," she said. "Properly." He reached into his pocket. Not a dramatic production, not a performance. A small velvet box, navy blue, carried for 2 weeks in the same pocket as his phone, which had left a small impression in the fabric. He opened it. The ring inside was simple. Platinum, single diamond, the kind of thing that would look right in a NICU corridor or a boardroom or a kitchen at 2 in the morning. The kind of thing designed to be worn, not displayed. "Ava Mitchell," he said, "I am asking you to spend the rest of your life with someone who highlighted a grocery list in 3 colors and considers that a reasonable expression of feeling. I am asking because you are the most honest person I have met in my adult life, and because you chose to keep fighting when fighting was the harder option, and because my children are going to need someone with your particular quality of steady, and because—" He stopped. "Because I love you," he said. "That's the primary reason. The rest is supporting material." She looked at him for a long moment. "Yes," she said. He put the ring on her finger. Baby B slept through the entire thing, which Ava later said was the most accurate possible preview of parenting she could have received. From the waiting room, Caro received a text containing only a photo. The ring, Ava's hand, the window behind them, the city lit in morning gold. Her response arrived in 4 seconds. "I knew it." The highlighted grocery list was the clearest possible signal. "I told you. I literally told you. I said the man highlighted a prenatal nutrition guide in 3 colors, and you said, that's just how he is. And I said that is how someone in love is. I told you. Please acknowledge that I told you." Ava typed back, "You told me. I am choosing to read that as a complete vindication." It was. Oliver, in Seattle, received a text from Ethan at 9 in the morning. It said, "3 healthy. Everyone is well. Come home when you're ready." And then, after a pause that Oliver could feel even through a text message, "You're not unforgiven. You were scared." I understand scared. Oliver sat in a Seattle coffee shop and cried for approximately 4 minutes. The barista brought him a refill without being asked and did not comment, which he found very kind. In the weeks that followed, and in the months after that, and in the particular shape of the life that assembled itself from the aftermath of surviving, Ava would sometimes stand at a window in the early morning while the babies slept and think about what it had cost her to get here. The answer was almost everything, and then something had held. Some wire in her that Derek had spent years trying to find and cut had turned out to be buried deeper than he knew. She had not known it was there herself for a long time. She had thought she was just surviving. It turned out, survival, done long enough with enough intention, becomes something else. Surviving a relationship built on control doesn't mean the fear disappears overnight. It means you learn to act in spite of it. It means you find the people who show up on ordinary Tuesdays. You document the truth and stop protecting someone else's reputation at the expense of your own safety. You ask for help when you need it, and you stop calling that weakness. And then one morning, you stand at a window with a sleeping baby in your arms, and the city outside and someone in the kitchen making coffee who highlighted a grocery list because he didn't know how else to say, "I am paying attention to you." And you realize you are not running anymore. You are not hiding. You are not surviving. You are just here. Finally, undeniably, completely here. And here, it turns out, is everything. The content of this story has been carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to ensure it carries genuine meaning, emotional truth, and a message worth your time. We do not generate and publish. We build, one story at a time.